Welcome to my presentation on the overview of the Georgia tax appeal process. The reason why this presentation is important are three things. Number one, the Georgia tax appeal process is a mystery to most people and they are greatly intimidated by it. Number two, I have found, and I have talked to many property owners over the years as well, they would say that the assessed values for their properties are often incorrect and in fact they're just too high. Number three, because the assessed values are often too high and excessive, the property owners are paying much more taxes than they should be every year. With this presentation, these are my objectives. It's really quite simple. Number one, I want to remove some of the mystery out of the Georgia tax appeal process and try to explain it to you in a very simplified fashion. And number two, I really want to empower property owners to get more control over their annual tax expense. I will tell you from personal experience, for many years, I didn't know what to do about it either. I would look at it, I'd gripe about it, and put it to the side. I would hear rumblings that there was a tax appeal process, but I never followed up on it. There always seemed to be other things that I could be doing besides tackling this. Roughly around 10 years ago, I decided to get more serious about it only because I just felt like the expenses for my rental properties were getting out of control. The two expenses that were getting out of control were the insurance and the property taxes. Regarding property taxes, that is when I began my personal journey to pursue it further, calling the tax assessor's office and really muddle my way through it. Over the years, I have been able to accumulate experience and knowledge over the process. Now, as a disclaimer, I want to let you know that this presentation should not be considered legal, financial, or professional advice. This is general information only. So if you have something that's really critical, you should hire a professional to help you. This presentation is based on my personal experiences. It's based on my personal opinion, having filed over 100 tax appeals in 4 Georgia counties. Now, in Georgia, there are 159 counties, so therefore, I can't speak to every single county in Georgia. The general process in which I am going to be explaining should generally be the same for all the counties. So let's just start off with step one. Step one is you are going to get a notice of assessment, the PT-306 form, and it's typically sent out or May or June. I have monitored this over the years in 4 different counties, and it just seems to go around the May or June timeframe. Now, when you get the notice of assessment, it is your job to look it over. The value that you're going to be looking over is how much value are they putting onto your property. If you agree with it, then obviously you don't need to file a tax appeal. You can just let it be, and towards the end of the year, you'll get a bill from the tax commissioner's office. Because we're talking about the Georgia tax appeal process, we're going to assume that you are not satisfied with the value that has been assigned to your property. When you make that determination, you have 45 days from when the letter was generated to file an appeal. So you're going to want to look at your form. The day you receive your notice of assessment will generally be a week after when the letter was generated by the tax assessor's office. So by the time it gets to you, you've lost about 7 days. So you can do the math from there. You will have 30 plus days to file an appeal. You will be using the form PT-311-A form. I cover that in a separate video. If you don't file an appeal before the due date, which will be clearly printed on your notice of assessment, the value will stand for the year. And then the tax commissioner will send you the bill based on that value. Now, if you file an appeal using the PT-311-A form on time, the tax assessor's office will do a first look and evaluation of your appeal. So when I say filing your tax appeal form on time, it basically means your appeal form signed, dated, and postmarked by the due date that has been printed on the letter. Now, after you send out your tax appeal form, within roughly 90 days, you will either receive a change of assessment, which is a PT-306C form, which looks very, very similar to the original notice of assessment form. There are some minor differences on the upper right-hand corner of the form, but generally it looks very similar. Or you're going to receive a no change letter, which is essentially them saying, hey, we got your appeal, we looked at it, we are not going to make any changes to the assessment. Basically, they are not going to move off of their position at this stage. If you receive a change of assessment notice, the PT-306C, you can either accept the revised value or you can choose to continue the appeal. For most people, I would recommend people to continue the appeal, even if you agree with the value. The reason being is if you don't continue it, you give up your right to freeze your taxes for 3 years. And that's a huge benefit that property owners should take advantage of. So when you get the change of assessment form and you decide to continue the appeal, you have 30 days to continue the appeal. Once again, when you get your change of assessment form, the day you receive it will probably be around a week after they generated the letter. In practical terms, you have 3 weeks to continue the appeal. Now, if you do receive a no change letter, your appeal is automatically forwarded to the Board of Equalization. Years ago, when I received a no change letter, I would think to myself, wow, even after all the information I sent them, they still didn't agree with me. Generally, I would still push forward only because I really wanted to confront the issue and find out what information they had that I didn't have. Well, it turns out that lots of times you may get a no change letter simply because of the workload that the tax assessor's office has. They may do a cursory look, but they're not going to dig into it too hard because they're being hit by a whole bunch of appeals. They have to respond in a timely manner. Sometimes it's just simply easier for them to issue a no change letter than for them to do a deep dive into your case. Regardless of the reason of you're getting the no change letter, and they won't necessarily tell you at that time, you're going to have to decide whether you want to push forward or not. In my general recommendation, I do recommend that people move forward. Whether you get a no change letter or you chose to continue your appeal, both roads lead to the BOE. When your appeal is forwarded to the BOE, a BOE hearing date will be set. Now, I'm going to warn you ahead of time. You will have little or no say as to when your BOE hearing will be scheduled. It is something that I have had to contend with over the years. And the reason being is lots of times these BOE hearings happen around November, December, January. Obviously, there's a lot of holidays. There are people taking vacations and things along those lines. So I get concerned about the scheduling. It is something to be aware of. Once the BOE has your appeal and they schedule it, you have a time window in which you and the tax assessor's office can negotiate and settle an appeal. Many years ago, I thought that once the BOE hearing was scheduled, you simply waited for the hearing date to present your case. However, over the years, I have since learned that that waiting period is really a great opportunity for you and the tax assessor's office to negotiate and settle your appeal. I certainly would recommend settling an appeal if at all possible. Now, when you have discussions with the tax appeals office regarding your appeal, they're going to make an effort, generally speaking, to settle with you as well. The reason being is that there is a considerable amount of time that they have to expend to prepare their case for the BOE hearing. Now, assuming that everybody is serious and you're committed to the process and you've made a good faith effort to settle your appeal, you will only have one opportunity to reschedule the BOE hearing if you feel you need to, because there is only one time that you can make the change. As a general rule, I don't recommend you rescheduling unless you really need to. In my experience, BOE hearings are generally grouped into morning and afternoon sessions. If memory serves me correct, most of the morning sessions start around 9 o'clock, give or take 30 minutes, and the afternoon sessions start about 1 or 2 o'clock. Every county is going to work a little bit different. The basic rule of thumb is just think about the morning and then after lunch. That will make your life a little bit easier. Now, most recently, with COVID-19, I've learned that remote BOE hearings are certainly possible. In 2 appeals in 2 different counties, one was in Cobb County, one was in Fulton County, I found out that the procedures for the remote BOE hearings varied. So in the case of Fulton County, I, as a representative, was able to stay at home for the BOE hearing. Now in Cobb County this past year, they said that the taxpayer or the representative would have to go to the hearing, and the board members were the ones that were remote. And so that's my 2 stories for Fulton County and Cobb County. Fortunately for me, I've not had to appear at many BOE hearings. In fact, the BOE hearings I attended were voluntary. Basically, it was for me just to see what it was like. The hearings are typically 20 to 30 minutes in duration, and they're conversational in nature. During a BOE hearing, each side presents their side of the case, their evidence, their photos, their data. After the presentation and some discussion at the table, the board renders their decision. Oftentimes, the decision is made known at the end of the hearing, and then the official results are then mailed. As a side note, I have seen where in the midst of the discussion during a BOE hearing, the 2 sides seem to come together. There's a little bit of give and take in the discussion, and they mutually agree on a value in the presence of the board members. And that generally is a pleasant outcome when that occurs. At the end of the BOE hearing, if either side disagrees with the decision, they can appeal the decision with the County Superior Court. Now, the details and procedures of proceeding to County Superior Court is beyond the scope of this presentation.